if we go back in kind of just recent history, it's not too long ago. It was November 30th, 2022, that we'll say AI reached the mass consciousness of humanity with the launch of Chat GPT. And I'm curious to get your take on this. Why is this an important date to consider? Because it wasn't that long ago.
Sure. So I think you put it well when you said this is when AI kind of entered the mass consciousness because AI technologies have been around in some form or fashion, depending on what we're classifying as technology, since 1960s or so, when the some of the first algorithms were really being developed. And it's had a number of kind of summers and winters of investment and excitement. And really, November 22nd, with the sort of explosion of ChatGPT, marks, I would say, a new era of awareness and democratization of AI tools. So before AI was embedded in a lot of the things that we do, there was some level of awareness that when Netflix recommended shows to us, or Amazon recommended products, or our social media feed showed us something from a particular friend, that there was machine learning working in the background to decide and feed those things to us. But it wasn't really something that people outside of academia or tech or engineering really spent a lot of time, for the most part, working with. And so having the launch of ChatGPT, an immediately useful, interesting, and delightful tool just for free, with all of these capabilities that are shockingly refined compared to sort of past iterations of the same thing. Because there's a GPT-2, there was an Instruct GPT. Uh, you know, the transformer architecture has been around for a while, and I'd actually played around with it a little bit, some years prior. But it just wasn't to a point where it had the immediate and obvious usability, and it wasn't something that was put out there and able to kind of go viral and impress and fuel the news cycle. So it
Yes.
was it was really, I think, just a coincidence of the capabilities hitting a new and important benchmark, and that being accessible and testable by just about everyone. And so that was a perfect fuel, perfect timing for it to go viral and really get a ton of attention and start to fuel this massive rise of AI investment and development and productization that we've been seeing ever since.
Yes, and one of the things that you were discussing is it's AI has been around, but it wasn't accessible to the quote unquote masses. You touched on machine learning or ML, and I think it's important to just pause for a minute to help those watching and listening to gain some clarity about the relationship between AI and LLMs, or large language models. This is an area you spend a lot of time thinking about. What's the context here for someone watching and listening to be aware of?
Sure. So AI, artificial intelligence, means a lot of things, and that makes talking about it somewhat difficult, right? It's the buzzword. We've
Yep.
been hearing it in different spaces, different ways for a long time. But when it comes down to it, it refers to a whole spectrum of technologies that are in some way fueled by machine learning, where instead of a software being explicitly coded to take a series of steps, do a particular thing, it instead is coded to learn from a set of examples in order to guide its ultimate behaviors, right? And so that's used in any number of things, right? It's in image recognition, it's in speech recognition and processing, it's in sentiment analysis, it's in document extraction, optical character recognition, all different kinds of analytics. It's in digital assistants, it's in language generation, it's in image generation now. It's in knowledge representation. Any number of areas, right? So the way that I tend to think about AI and what I tell clients is that you should think about AI as infrastructure. It's
Mm,
it's how something is done. It's not a what, really. There are AI products, there are products built on top of AI, there are products that are, 95% just regular code with AI bolt on for some piece of it. There are tools that have trained up an algorithm, like loan decisioning, for example, or customer segmentation, which have maybe trained up on their algorithm that on a set of data, and that's machine learning, that's AI. But in terms of how it executes it, it's not learning in an ongoing fashion, right? It's a bolt-on that provides one piece of a broader technology solution. And so that varies solution to solution how much sort of ML is in it, but usually it's a piece, it's a how, it's not a what.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about doing AI or investing in AI, usually we're talking about solutions that are built on top of AI in some form or fashion.
What surprised you most since the launch of Chat GPT? Thinking about the pace of change, it's not just the pace of change, it's really the pace of exponential change that we have experienced since then in all different areas. If you think back, to 1994, you had the launch of the internet, essentially once again reaching the mass consciousness of humanity. It had been around in academia before that, but in 1994, I think it's fun to go back and watch how the internet was being talked about on like the Today Show. What is email? And things that we take for granted. It's almost history is repeating itself now, where there's some confusion, there's some hope, there's some optimism, there's some people are scared about this. But what surprised you most? Oh, just thinking back, to November of 2022 with the launch of ChatGPT.
Sure. So I have something that's specific that I'll get to, but in terms of like the explosion of investment, I'm maybe a little surprised by its magnitude, but less surprised by kind of the course that things have taken. So I was working in automation, specifically robotic process automation, back in my Deloitte days before, the current kind of AI renaissance. And the way that a lot of these things tend to work with technologies that primarily automate tasks, is there's a paradigm shift, there's a new type of technologies, there's an advancement, a new architecture, and that's used to there's sort of like that seminal moment when it comes out and the market realizes that it's valuable and can be productized outside of the research space. And then the next kind of 5 to 25 years, depending on what technology we're looking at, are spent then building that into the business environment. Taking that core capability and productizing it in hundreds or thousands of different ways to go from that fundamental sort of finding new capability that lets new things be possible, and then making those easier and more accessible for industry to use, and also adapting business processes and adapting industries and roles and structures and services, entire industries sometimes around that automation. And that's just the history of how this sort of thing works, right? When we moved from switchboards to centralized telephone routing, we moved to cell phones. The introduction of spreadsheet software, and ultimately Excel, right? Accounting used to be done very differently, and now it's just kind of second nature to us. This is just how we do things. But there was a whole period after the introduction of those tools. There were early adopters, there were late adopters, and a lot of old business processes didn't match perfectly with the new capabilities. And so there's this adjustment on both ends. On the vendor side, on the solution side, you have the tools getting more usable. And on the client side, you have the business processes being re-engineered to work better and take better advantage of the tools to maximize the value getting out of them. So I'm not actually too surprised by the direction things have taken with AI investment, because I think we're seeing very much the same thing right now. What I didn't expect perhaps about this newest architecture is the level of emergent capabilities, which is kind of like a I don't know, an imprecise word in this field because it can refer to so much. It's very vague, and sometimes it's used as like a blanket. Just the model did something we don't really understand how, so
Right.
it's emergent. Um, but it's the case where seeing just the massive spectrum of domains where large language models have had a huge impact and rapidly, right? Not just in a research capacity or in a this is something that concerns data scientists, but in a way that this substantially transforms different industries and how we how we understand and do things, right? So it's not just a a bot that can produce text and extrapolate from text to try to finish writing a chapter of a novel, right? Or to write marketing copy. It's a virtual assistant that's shockingly capable from everything from summarizing lots of data to analyzing tone to uh, evaluating new content to copy editing to code generation and code review. You know, and then if you hook that up to the right things, you can code websites from a prompt. You can generate images if you add in the particular framework that's being used to generate images from static, and you add in some of that semantic understanding. It's just been a kind of puzzle piece that has slotted in so many different places, and particularly the ability to sort of reason that has come out of this from just feeding these architectures enough data, the right data, doing the right training and fine tuning, to let them basically draw on their training sets to say what's a sensible next course of action given XYZ input. And that's enabled some truly insane things. Like what surprised me most, I think, when I saw it some months back was some of the impacts to robotics, which I know isn't really a financial industry sort of area, but um, it was crazy to me to see a demo of I think Google's Palm E um, that was able to plan and execute actions, or basically have the large language model acting in some sense as the brain reasoning to interpret the visual input to say, what am I looking at? Then what do I need to do? What's the plan and sequence of actions to take here? And then that being able to be translated automatically in real time into instructions for a physical robot body uh, to flexibly complete tasks, to pick up objects, clean things up, get something from a drawer, and to have that be resilient to interference. I mean, we've all seen the Boston Dynamics videos
Yes.
of those robots adjusting, right? But that a lot of that is kind of is more hard coded. Um, but like the reasoning or the appearance of reasoning that you get out of these and hooking that into agentic models, things that can act as agents in the physical or virtual world, that is something that really threw me.